Hi, today is Sunday and it's time to catch up on everything that happened this week. What's going on with all of these trolls that have suddenly activized on every platform? And what's the most dangerous thing the West can do in trying to stop Russia? Ooh, and the Czech Republic has a new president. Is he good for Ukraine? Let's discuss. With that, hi, my name is Yulia and you're watching The Brief, where we discuss everything that happened in and pertaining to Ukraine in the week so far in under 20 minutes. Let's go. Hungary has long been standing in the way of aid to Ukraine, sanctions against Russia, and just resolutions on their war crimes. Why? Because Viktor Orban is very close to Putin, and Putin's success is helpful for him. But this week, even he crossed a line. He compared Ukraine to Afghanistan and called it a no man's land. The spokesman for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Oleg Nikolenko, said that Budapest is continuing to destroy any possibility of Hungarian-Ukrainian relationships and undermining the possibility of further dialogue between the neighboring countries. Here are the three things that Orban said during a press conference in Budapest. 1. He declared that the time in which Russia could conquer Ukraine and establish a pro-Russian government in the country has passed, so one thing he got right. So now the Russian Federation wants to turn Ukraine into an ungovernable ruin so that the West can't claim it as a prize. Again, a damaging statement because it makes it sound like Ukrainians do not have their own collective consciousness and don't know what they're fighting for, and they're just being pawns to the West, which is simply not true and a damaging Russian rhetoric. 2. He declared that the direct participation of NATO troops in the Russian-Ukrainian war is possible. So he fear-mongered. You would think that maybe this statement is not so dangerous, but it's aimed at the people who are against NATO helping Ukraine to make them feel like Ukraine is overstepping and NATO will have to intervene, and it's completely unjustifiable. In the event of successful spring counteroffensive, NATO troops should consider sending soldiers to Ukraine, boots on the ground. I'm not quite sure why he's advocating for this, because that doesn't help him in any way. 3. That Russia has more production capacity than it shows, and that in all wars it was initially weaker and then unstoppable. Well, that's just a blatant lie, because right now Russia is sanctioned. They have no production capacity because they're not taking that production capacity out of all the countries they used to abuse for it. And in wars like World War II, all of their ammunition and all of their equipment came from the Lend-Lease with the United States, which is something that tankies often seem to forget, and they try to write all of the successes to Russia and Russian equipment and Russian soldiers and forget that it was hugely helped by absolutely everybody else involved in the conflict. And if we're talking about Georgia and Moldova, well then, Russia had superiority right away. They attacked in small regions, not a whole country, and obviously the armed resistance there was not enough. So, blatant misinformation, Orban. Blatant misinformation. He then continued on as saying that Hungary will veto any sanctions against the Russian Federation's nuclear energy sector. Ukrainian authorities have been calling on all EU countries to include Russia's energy plant Rosatom under sanctions, and Hungary has already spoken out very much against it. But why? Not only because they're such good friends with Putin, no, but also Hungary has a nuclear power plant built in the Russian Federation, which they're planning on expanding together with Rosatom. So, self-serving bias and self-serving reasoning. And for all of those reasons and more, I think that when we prosecute Russian war crimes and Russian crimes in Ukraine, we have to include Hungary as someone who was aiding and abetting them, because as I mentioned in the beginning of this brief, they have been playing a key role in helping Russia circumvent, avoid the sanctions, and in helping weaken Ukraine and not give it weapons or monetary aid. And with that, Russia's other partner, Belarus, who tries to pretend to be so innocent and screams in every corner that Ukraine is getting ready to attack them and they're just protecting themselves by letting Russia launch missiles off of their territory, by having provided a clear entrance for the Russian tanks into Ukraine in the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Not so innocent. are you? And so for that reason, the PACE voted for the creation of a special tribunal on Russian war crimes, and Belarus will be held equally as responsible. They also recognize that the military aggression of Russia against Ukraine began in 2014, not 2022. Australia, France, and UK are going to join this tribunal to make sure that all of these actions go punished. And because Russia can't go without committing war crimes even a day, meanwhile, Ukraine was attacked at night of January 26 with a bunch of Shahed drones. Kyiv was subject to another air raid by several dozens of Shahed barrage ammunitions. About 15 of such enemy UAVs were shot down in the airspace. As a result, explosions rang out in the Dnipropetrovsky district of the capital, and fragments of the missiles fell in the Holosiyevsky district, as a result of which 1 person died and 2 were injured. And the attack on Kyiv was caught on camera live by journalists. Take a look.
Where was it? Not far away.
Dnipropetrovsk region suffered a confirmed hit on an industrial enterprise with no casualties, thankfully. Yuri Ignat confirmed a hit on Vinnytsia as well, and in Odessa, as a result of shelling, 2 objects of critical infrastructure were damaged. Air defense forces also worked in Mykolaiv, Zaporizhia, and Zhytomyr. And after that, the invaders launched an offensive on Vuhledar. Spoiler alert, they failed miserably. Vuhledar is a strategically important communications hub, and more importantly, the border for Ukraine's future offensive on the Crimean corridor. The capture of Vuhledar will significantly improve the strategic position of the Russian army in Donbass, will allow it to deepen the defense. The goal of the Russian command in the 2023 campaign is to capture the entire Donbass, or push our army away from the Crimean corridor. And to accomplish that, they sent elite brigades of Marines and airborne troops to capture the city. But they were significantly unsuccessful. And that in turn gave an opportunity to the armed forces of Ukraine to weaken them, which they did. And for that reason, you have been seeing much more trolls online on all different social media platforms, because they're trying to create an idea that Russians are not doing nearly as badly as they have been. Think about it. Leopard tanks have been announced for Ukraine. The Vuhledar offensive failed. Wagner has had huge losses, and that used to be like the hope of Russian army previously. So normally when things like that happen, Russians launch massive misinformation campaigns to make it seem like they're doing better than they are, and to weaken Ukrainian information campaigns. So if you see more and more trolls, it's for that reason. The British intelligence believes that there is a real possibility that Russian news sources are deliberately spreading disinformation in an attempt to show that the Russian operation is gaining momentum. Bingo. When they can't have real gains on the battlefield, they try to fabricate them online. And the Secretary of NSDC, Alexei Danilov, further confirmed this statement as February 24th is approaching and there are no results. That's why they're conducting such a comprehensive work. Someone says that we can't win. Someone says other nonsense. They're now maximally activated, and in the near future we can hear many different similar thoughts, he stressed. And the Russians have indeed become much more active in their psyops, in the information space of Ukraine. Personally, on Twitter, I have 10 times as many trolls writing all sorts of Ukrainians are Nazis. You're so stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. Your information is wrong. Why don't you go read? I hope that this channel falls. Things every day. And while that's normal for anyone who speaks about Ukraine, it has been amplified so much in the past 2 weeks. So stay on the lookout. And with that, if you would like to counter the trolls and help the Ukrainian information space, you could help creators like me by boosting us in the algorithm a little bit. So give this video a like, leave a comment on it, because honestly, I respond to most of them and I love interacting with my audience. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on all of your notifications, and I will be so grateful, and you will be helping our information war. Thanks. But to help on the real front, the first Shahed catchers have just arrived in Ukraine. How cool are those? And with that spirit, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine announced the formation of the world's first UAV strike companies. Since drone warfare becoming more and more relevant, those are comprised of Starlink stations, drones and ammunition, and other necessary equipment. And it's happening within the framework of the Army of Drones project. And that's not the only first that Ukraine has done this week. We created our own 155mm self-propelled gun called Bogdana. And one of them was successfully tested on the battlefield. Look at Alexei Reznikov, our defense minister, sitting in one of them, proudly showing it off. The Ministry of Defense funded this project in the spring of 2022 because Ukraine has to be as independent as possible in all components of defense support where it has potential. Reznikov believes that this makes our country a desirable partner and strengthens our positions. And it's very true. If you think about it, Ukraine has developed so many new things since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. For the weapons that we didn't have, we created solutions. For the drones that didn't exist, we created solutions. So if we're not getting what we need, we're simply gonna create it. And soon, we're going to present the first results of our UAV manufacture. And speaking of getting what we need, not getting what we need, people complaining about Ukraine's corruption and where the weapons go, which we were always so happy to provide all of the accounting for. But anyways, now you won't have to worry about where anything goes, because inspectors have arrived in Ukraine to monitor the aid provided by the United States. So rest easy, taxpayers. The aid is in good hands. And on that note, that's all in Ukraine, so let's move on to Russia. According to POF, only 14% of Russian citizens are ready to protest, and that protest potential is at its lowest in the last year. Russians are dismotivated by the fact that they are thrown to jail, that they're supposedly killed for expressing opinions that don't align with the government, but let me provide you with a statistic that contradicts that. In reality, 19,478 people have been detained in Russia for protesting between February 24th of 2022 and December 14th of the same year. So let's say that at most 50,000 people protested out of 150 million people to begin with. Now hold on, that's not it. 5,518 of those have had administrative measures taken against them. So a fine, a ticket, or something of that matter. Nothing serious. Meanwhile, Russians scream of the terrible consequences they face for protesting, right? And here is an even more staggering statistic. Only 384 people have suffered criminal prosecutions, so have been thrown to jail or might have been tortured there or something like that. 384 people. For perspective, that is less criminal prosecutions than happened during the BLM protests of 2020 in the United States. Let that sink in. When Russians tell you that they can't do anything, think about the BLM movement in the US in 2020 and how many people have been prosecuted, have been arrested, and have been fined versus the anti-war movement in Russia. Think about it. And the Public Opinion Foundation has also found out that 80% of respondents believe that Vladimir Putin is doing his job very well, and 79% of them trust him and his actions. So here is reality for you. It's not that Russians can't protest, it's that they don't want to, and there are not enough people that are ready to do so, or even believe in the cause. And Putin, despite huge losses, is preparing a new offensive against Ukraine. Putin still believes that greater forces, guess like the Russian Orthodox Church preaches, God is with Russian people, will still allow him to win. The dictator is convinced that he cannot lose in what he considers an existential conflict between Russia and the United States. Funny, because it's on the territory of Ukraine, and it's existential for Ukrainians, and in the United States nobody's dying, nor are they dying in the territory of Russia, but go off. The Russian Federation is forming military depots 80 to 120 kilometers from the front line, which means that Ukraine will need longer range artillery. And they're trying to create conditions for an offensive in Luhansk region. According to the Institute for the Study of War, in the next 6 months, Russia is preparing for decisive strategic actions, most likely in the Luhansk region or in the Vuhledar district of the Donetsk region. But despite that, Volodymyr Zelensky believes that Putin is a nobody and there will be no negotiations with him. Or rather, because of that. In an interview with Sky News, Volodymyr Zelensky disregarded Putin as saying he's nobody for him, and he is not sure who makes decisions in Russia. According to Zelensky, he's not interested in neither meeting the Russian president nor talking with him. And then Victoria Nuland said that the sanctions against the Russian Federation can be eased if it withdraws troops and returns Ukrainian territories. And that statement is one of the biggest mistakes that the West can make in dealing with Russia. Once Russian officials are tired of what Putin is doing, what they're gonna try to do is they're gonna try to take him out and put someone else like Navalny in his place. Then they will say that all of Russia's problems have magically been fixed because it's not Russians, it's just Putin, right? It isn't, and Navalny is just the same Russian nationalist with white supremacy background, may I add, who's going to have the same aggressive external politics but be slightly better to Russians. He's young, he's healthy, and he's going to restructure and reformat Russia so much so that all of this corruption and all of the atrocities that are going on inside of their government are going to function better. The problem is not Putin. The problem is Russia and the rot that is happening within the systems of Russia. By no means should the West fall victim to it's just Putin and ease the sanctions if Russia withdraws, returns territories, and changes the president. First, have them do all of that, change the president, give it a couple of years, see how they do, and then make that decision. Don't make that mistake. And since we have arrived at the topic of international affairs, let's get into it. Czech Republic has elected a new president, Petr Pavel. What's his stance on Ukraine? Despite having been member of Communist Party in the past, he's a member of liberal conservative coalition. He's pro-abortion, pro-same-sex marriage, pro-euthanasia, and pro-Ukraine. He was also one of NATO's top officials in 2015. He wants to strengthen the alliance, and he wants Czech Republic to take a much more pro-European course. In fact, he seems to be so pro-Ukrainian and such a problem for Russia that they have tried to quite literally take him down and launched a massive disinformation campaign against him right before the election. A series of emails and notices has been sent to voters saying that he had died the night right before the election. Fake messages have also been sent from his election campaign stating that he's inviting them to join combat in Ukraine to try and ruin his reputation. But none of that worked and he still got elected. And he's also responsible for holding one of the most true Ukraine-aligned opinions. He was recorded as saying a little while ago that Russians who flee the war are not necessarily against the war. They're more likely just against dying in it or participating. So welcome aboard, congratulations on your success, and we can't wait to host you in Kyiv. Italian Defense Minister Guido Crosetto also expressed a very strong message of support to Ukraine this week. Here it is. The Third World War will begin when Russian tanks appear in Kyiv and on the borders of Europe. Preventing their arrival is the only way to stop the Third World War. He's convinced that supplying modern weapons, heavy weapons, to Ukraine is the only way to prevent escalation. While people like Scholz say that transferring aircraft to Ukraine is going to escalate the conflict, on the contrary, transferring Ukraine all the weapons we need is the only way to stop the Russian aggression. And with that in mind, a company of Leopard tanks from Poland is going to arrive in Ukraine as soon as in the next couple of weeks. As we might have heard earlier, the first tanks were gonna arrive in March, April, or May, but Poland is making it happen faster. And then a group of American senators at the head with Lindsey Graham praised Joe Biden for transferring Abrams tanks to Ukraine and called on F-16 jets and ATACMS to be next. They believe that the combination of Leopards, Abrams, F-16s, and ATACMS is going to expel Russia from Ukraine and guarantee Ukraine's faster victory. And I can't not agree with them. And the IMF is considering giving Ukraine one of the largest aid packages imaginable. A multi-year package in the amount of $16 billion. If approved, the 3 to 4 year program would provide Ukraine with $5 to $7 billion in the first year. The plan can be agreed upon by the end of March, and the first tranche of help would come in April. And the verdict on the Malaysian flight MH17 that was taken down over Donbass has been delivered. Russia is guilty. And I'll tell you more about it as you watch this animation that tried to recreate exactly what happened that day. Russia is responsible for the death of 298 passengers and crew members of the Malaysia Airlines Boeing 777. Moscow is guilty of refusing to properly investigate the causes of the disaster. The operative part of the decision of the European Court of Human Rights states from January 25th. Prosecutors say Russia played a major role in the Boeing crash and that the Kremlin is conducting a targeted disinformation campaign about the tragedy. They tried to blame Ukraine in it. The ECTHR calls such actions a gross violation of the civil rights of the relatives of the deceased. The court informed the presence of regular Russian troops in the region since April 2014. It was the Russian Federation that influenced the militants' strategy and supplied them with weapons and equipment. The problem is that, in the summer, Russia refused to comply with any decision of the European Court. Russia also said that they're not going to be extraditing the people that have been found directly accountable for giving out the orders that resulted in the tragedy. Because, and I quote, the international law has no power in Russia. So I really hope that when Ukraine wins, Russia is going to be held accountable in front of all of the families of the passengers and crew that lost their lives that day. They deserve justice. And we're gonna end today on a bit of a more positive note. Coursera launched a free English language course on the history and culture of Ukraine. And you already know that I'm going to drop the link in the description of this video. And you already know that I'm going to attach the link to the course in the description of this video so you can take it if you'd like. The course not only provides you with basic knowledge, but also shows the influence of Ukraine on European and world history. It consists of 5 modules that talk about the history of Ukraine from Middle Ages to the present. It was developed by the Ukrainian Institute EdEra educational platform in Kyiv-Mohyla National Academy. I, for one, am honestly very excited for this course, and I'm probably going to take it, so hey, maybe we'll end up in the same group. Or I don't know how it works, but we can discuss it. And last, but certainly not least, Israel made a very big revelation. Israel's ambassador to Germany, Ron Prosser, said that the country helps Ukraine more than is known. It's not as simple as it seems. As you know, the Israeli army regularly stops the supply of weapons from Iran to Syria and Lebanon. Among them are Iranian drones and missiles that Russia uses in Ukraine. And we've all heard about that strike on the drone facility in Iran the other day. And while we don't know who did that, my money is on Israel. What do you think? Do you think it was Azerbaijan, as is claimed? Or let me know in the comments. That's all I have for you for today. Thank you for watching, and if you stuck around this long, I will assume that you did enjoy this video or found it informative. And in that case, please give it a like, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel, and turn on all of your notifications so you don't miss when the next one comes out. And if you're feeling extra supportive, you can become a member of this channel or sign up for my Patreon. Thank you very much, and as always, check your sources and don't fall for propaganda. And I will see you on Wednesday.